Hello, Internet. Welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. My name is Josh Norris, here with John Daigle. John, you feeling wonderful? You feeling good?
I'm feeling good. We're closing out to the beginning of week 2.
Yeah.
I think we're ready to actually start analyzing some matchups now.
What have you been doing with your free time? I know this is like your first real week of actual game action as a Rotoworld employee. So what's the free time been like?
What is the definition of free time? What is free time? How about that?
Maybe this is a better question to ask. In like a perfect scenario where you got to leave work at work and not go home and watch every single Gardner Minshew throw when he comes in for Nick Foles.
Yeah, that we do, yes.
What would be the ideal hobby for John Daigle once he goes home and rests at home?
So I'm the person that doesn't turn off. So even if it's like a couple hours at a driving range or something simple like that in the morning before sunrise, I genuinely just go back to work. Like it does not stop in my brain.
I would have guessed something like jiu-jitsu. I could see you because like your center of gravity. I'm not calling you short.
I take boxing classes.
Okay.
But not that I actually box, like I'm a wimp. But I enjoy the cardio I get from it. So.
Okay, that makes us two wimps up here. Okay. Daigle, today the podcast is our typical Thursday/Friday podcast. Later on, we'll have RotoPat on to talk about his notable rankings. We'll start the show actually with 6 game previews, 3 with you and I, and 3 later with Hayden Winks, who has his fantasy forecast column coming up on Rotoworld as well after this podcast drops. We will get to the Sam Darnold news and how that impacts the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns.
We've been thinking about it all morning.
That's actually the third game we'll preview, but let's start off with the Arizona Cardinals traveling to the Baltimore Ravens. 46.5 total for these two teams, with Baltimore at home, Daigle, 13.5-point favorites. That certainly is not a projected total that you see very often.
Well, there's reason for that, because we saw the Lions take advantage of the Cardinals' offensive play hike and play 16 plays above their average plays per game from last season. And now you have the Ravens, who we know are going to get off a lot of plays, did so against Miami, take advantage of that hike most likely as well. So this game, what we can forecast for sure is offense from both sides of the ball, I believe.
There might not have been a team that was more impressive in week 1 than the Baltimore Ravens, right? I mean, they were absolutely sensational. Offensively, obviously that first run that they had of 41 yards with Mark Ingram, and just continued from there. And maybe no rookie, and I actually have a piece on Rotoworld right now ranking the top 10 rookies based on their week 1 performances.
Yeah, you returned to writing. I got so excited last night when I saw it.
And I cannot stop talking about Marquis Brown. I mean, we talked about him earlier this week, but it's not just those 2 big plays from his performance. It was also this 2nd and 6 snap that he took a 5-yard curl and picked up 11 yards immediately. Like that type of stuff translates week to week. It's not just these vertical shots that you see high variance. I think, because he only saw 15 snaps in week 1, that if you gave him 30, 45 snaps in a game, he might put up 3, 4, 5 meaningful snaps for his team to win.
Which is what I think will be this game. I know some people doubt that and believe he'll be limited as early as this week still, but I don't think so. I genuinely think he and Miles Boykin, who also played a limited number of snaps, will play a full extent if needed in this game.
And on Arizona's side, I mean, obviously the defense is still banged up. We know that Patrick Peterson is still on the sideline due to suspension. So Lamar Jackson can continue his outstanding, maybe even quarterback 1 performance. Again, 13.5-point favorites at home. I also loved how Baltimore was using 3 tight ends. Like they would run 13 personnel and use 2 of them basically as wide receivers, or 3 of them in a bunch formation, and create running lanes in that department. And I know you're excited to see how they're going to continue to use maybe in more of a neutral game script than we saw in the past, despite what the team total suggests, how they are going to use Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, and Justice Hill all combined in that backfield.
And I do think all will be combined, as well as their tight ends. I still can't believe when you look up and see that they essentially split time. Mark Andrews still escaped because he's so damn efficient with 8 and 108. It's amazing how efficient that guy is on just 30% of their snaps. But yes, I am curious to see what they do in a game that they need to play throughout the entire time, all of them.
Because Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, and Justice Hill all saw carries and touches in the first series for the Ravens.
That's right. I'm still skeptical about Gus Edwards' involvement.
Of course, because you love Justice Hill.
Yes, that's very true. But yeah, and especially because Mark Ingram, and I said especially because Mark Ingram looked very well. Mark Ingram looked great.
If you call out every time you say especially, we won't be here
It's a work in progress, Josh.
We haven't talked at all about the Cardinals. As you know, it was a very, very slow development in this game. I mean, for the first 3 quarters, it was absolutely horrific. Then Kyler Murray hit Larry Fitzgerald on like a 27-yard layout, full blown reception that was outstanding on Fitz's part despite being 42 years old. And that really kind of jump-started them throughout the entire game. If the Cardinals can package, and if Kyler Murray can package that fourth quarter and overtime and take that into the first quarter in this game, something really special can happen. But we don't know if they have to, again, restart, wear down defenses with how many plays they run, how many wide receivers run downfield, and then can maximize it with the talent that Kyler Murray has.
And there are 3 caveats in this game for the Cardinals. 1, Michael Crabtree is going to be active. What that means, we're not sure.
Revenge game.
But I don't think, yes, he's active for the revenge game. That's it. I don't think he takes away from Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk in the slot at all. He's going to eat at Damiere Byrd or
Keyshawn Johnson?
Keyshawn Johnson as well. It's probably Byrd, honestly. 2, Marcus Gilbert, their right tackle, still out. And Justin Murray's playing on the right side now. And he finished second among every single offensive lineman in pressures and hits allowed. And then you have, for 3, the Ravens defense, which I understand their points laying nearly 2 touchdowns, but I actually think it's still slightly overrated. And we haven't had a chance to see that yet. In the offseason, they lost C.J. Mosley, Zadarius Smith, Eric Weddle, Terrell Suggs.
Yeah.
They added Earl Thomas, yes.
Which is pretty good.
Yes, that's a good group. And they added Earl Thomas, and he's great. I understand that. But the Cardinals' offense is one that can attack their losses, and we genuinely don't know just yet since they didn't have a chance to display anything against the Dolphins, who allowed the 3rd highest pressure rate in the preseason. Like, we don't know if this Ravens defense is even above average just yet. Yeah. So I do think the Cardinals can hang.
I think so too. I mean, it comes down to hitting Christian Kirk on those 2 or 3 vertical passes that Kyler Murray missed at the start, and just getting into a groove early. Like, Pat joked about it on Monday, and it wasn't a joke for him. I thought it was. He just looked nervous, and because of those missed downfield passes, they just weren't able to string along drives. Like, they were going 3 and out way too often, and when that happens for a rookie quarterback, you start slowly. You cannot start slowly against the Baltimore Ravens. So we saw what happened last week against the Miami
Dolphins. I would expect their offense to look different as well. Kyler Murray played 41 dropbacks from 10 personnel, and the next closest in the entire league was 24 dropbacks from 10 personnel. I don't think they wanted to do that. I think it was forced in the second half because they were trailing by so much. So it will be interesting to see their personnel as well in that first half if they're competing.
And for all those clamoring for David Johnson to be more involved in the passing game, he already saw more air yards in week 1 than he did all of last season. So thank you, Cliff.
And his routes looked amazing.
So now let's go to the next game. It is the 425 contest on Sunday. The Saints at the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are favored by 3 at home. The total is 53 combined for both teams. You know, I know this is going to be an offensive battle. The Saints versus the Rams, both known for offense. Daigle, on Monday, I was very surprised about the Saints defense. I thought that this is a team that created a lot of turnovers last year, created disruption, but Deshaun Watson was able to kind of embrace that disruption as he does and fire downfield. I do wonder if Jared Goff will be able to do the exact same thing and win outside of structure because we know that's not his forte.
And we also know Jared Goff is not Deshaun Watson. So that's another issue. But Jared Goff is playing at home. Jared Goff is playing at home with Cooper Kupp, both things that give him positive splits historically in the past. So now it is a matter if the Saints can carry their weight because, as we said, last year, even in his decline, Drew Brees averaged 9.5 yards per attempt at home. That drops nearly 3 yards per attempt when he plays on the road, including last season. So can they keep up with this offense now? I have my doubts.
Yeah.
But if they do, I still think it is a great game for Jared Goff in the making here.
There's a lot of week 1 storylines that we overreact to or react to and then wonder if they come true again in week 2. And for the Rams, it's the split between Todd Gurley and Malcolm Brown. Because in week 1, Todd Gurley was, I'm not going to say pointless or useless for the first 3 quarters, but I think it's fair to say that Malcolm Brown outplayed him for those 3 quarters. Now, when the Rams wanted to close out the game, Todd Gurley came in the 4th quarter. They created seams and space for him, but he also created space against corners and safeties. Most importantly, though, Malcolm Brown got the early goal line touches and Todd Gurley did not. Do you think that stays the same? We're kind of in a wait-and-see mode still with this backfield.
Yeah, I know we are quote-unquote professional analysts, so we're supposed to tell the people what happened. Semi-professional, that's why I quote-unquoted it. So we're supposed to tell everyone the way to go with that route. But it's still so hard. The Rams recovered a fumble inside the 10, inserted Malcolm Brown.
Right.
So maybe next time it could be Gurley. And then on Malcolm Brown's other touchdown that occurred inside the 10, he was on that entire drive. So Gurley was just off the field. So Malcolm Brown still only played like less than 30% of their snaps, but he is still valuable in this role if he has that role.
Yeah.
But as you said, we are very much a wait and see. The big thing here is also Todd Gurley, who somehow, despite avoiding contact clearly, like escaping along the sidelines, sometimes hitting the ground a little early, still skeptical, you can tell, of his own knee. He led the entire league in yards after contact per attempt. Like, he would shake off tackles, which is amazing considering his condition.
Right.
So it's sort of a reason to buy on Todd Gurley, but also Malcolm Brown is valuable in this offense with this role.
Both can be valuable.
Absolutely.
It just might mean that Todd Gurley isn't the running back one overall like he was last season in some formats. And he might lose a little bit of his value. Again, we talked about so much of his points in 2018 came from the goal line situations, but also in the receiving game, and I believe he only had one reception last week.
Yes.
That can change week to week, and it might change against the Saints.
And in a shootout, in a game like I genuinely think, and I know I'm crazy here, I genuinely think Darrell Henderson still gets involved. Before my wife leaves me. Like, it's going to happen. Don't worry.
You have a wife?
No, I don't.
That's just the phrase you want to use
It's just
today?
a phrase I'm going to start using.
Trying to reach that young
because I have
demographic.
everything tied to Darrell Henderson being good this year.
We haven't mentioned the Saints at all. I thought Ryan Ramczyk, their right tackle, looked like one of the best right tackles in the league in week one, and he's going to be on his path to being paid as the top right tackle in the league probably. But I also want to say that Dante Fowler of the Rams probably had his best game of his career as well, and I think he rushes from the left side and the right side. Meanwhile, he was the one compensating for Aaron Donald kind of being stopped and limiting his pressure from the interior.
And their interior still broke down the Rams, as we expected. And that's what happened when Jared Goff got out of sync and had to force plays. Jared Goff can't make plays happen on the fly like a healthy Sam Darnold.
What did you think of Latavius Murray's debut with the Saints? I mean, he got that touchdown, saw some snaps, but with the Saints working in a negative game script, it certainly was a lot of Alvin Kamara, which we should expect.
Yes, I'm not buying it.
You're not?
No,
You're not a Latavius guy?
I am a Latavius guy.
Okay.
I'm not buying his reduced workload,
Got it.
which he still prospered in, by the way.
He did.
I think NFL Network's Graham Barfield was the first to tweet this out, but Kamara finished with a 75% snap rate. Latavius Murray played 28% of snaps, got 8 touches behind Kamara's 20. I don't buy that role for Murray. I still think he gets 35 or to 40 in a Mark Ingram role. Week 1 didn't allow for that, but I think moving forward and even starting in this game, I still love Latavius Murray. And he was a flex play last week on that reduced role. So if we see even a 10% bump in his snaps, like, he will stay a RB3 flex every single game.
35% of a snap rate out of the backfield on a really good football team can be absolutely meaningful.
Yes.
Set you up for scoring positions. All right, let's go to the Cleveland Browns at the New York Jets. This is Monday Night Football. Last time I checked, well, let's say this morning, before news hits, the Jets were 2.5-point home dogs. That has now switched to, I believe, 6.5 at the time of this recording. I am so glad today was a late recording. Thank you, Chris Sims, for delaying us, because this allowed us to get this news in, which completely shifts and changes the dynamic of this game. Sam Darnold is out. Sam Darnold has mononucleosis. Sam Darnold most likely will miss, obviously, this week, probably next week, and then the team has a bye week, and after that, face the likes of the Philadelphia Eagles, Dallas Cowboys, and New England Patriots. Let's focus on this week, though, because there's complete trickle down. It's not like Sam Darnold played well in week 1, but not having him on the field and inserting Trevor Siemian is still a negative when it comes to Jamison Crowder, Le'Veon Bell, so on and so forth.
He looked terrible
Awful.
in week 1. And I couldn't believe it when I was watching it. It's like, this is not the Sam Darnold we saw from last year. And now it sort of makes sense. I do wonder if he was already battling this diagnosis.
I think he was. I think Adam Gase, who just looked somber as ever in his press conference, which is something to be said, said that team doctors had run a litany of tests, and they came to Adam Gase and said, okay, we have to talk. We got to go talk to Sam. And Gase said, oh, it's mono, isn't it? And the doctors were surprised. So I think that this had been going on for a while, and because he had been on antibiotics, so on and so forth.
It is not just Sam Darnold, though, and that this team is facing, because now they're going into Monday night, and C.J. Mosley, who had a pick 6, I believe, is questionable, or not questionable just yet, but he hasn't practiced all this week.
Correct.
Quinnen Williams hasn't practiced all this week with an ankle injury, and then Le'Veon Bell is suddenly getting a surprise MRI on Thursday morning. So there's a lot of reason to be skeptical about this matchup.
It's not too surprising that the Jets' maybe peak was during preseason. the positivity there? Because it's a legit chance they might go 0-6 to start the season.
Yeah, their schedule is super tough. We thought Jameson Crowder could not outperform 14 catches for 99 yards. With Trevor Siemian under center, he could genuinely get 16 catches for 56 yards.
Yeah.
Like, his value, his floor is not lost with Trevor Siemian under center, but he has zero ceiling.
Yeah.
He's going to be like early Jarvis Landry, where you just played him as a safe way to get points, and that's it.
This might come back to bite us, but it's also not a Robbie Anderson game with Trevor Siemian under center.
No.
Adam Gase has kind of already threw Robbie Anderson under the bus a little bit. But this is not really a matchup that we expect. Even though the Titans did quite good against the Browns downfield and vertically, and this is crazy for me to say, but Marcus Mariota is an improvement over Trevor Siemian. Let's talk a little bit about the Browns, though, because we haven't talked about them at all. I mean, we just mentioned disappointment with the Jets. The Browns were a massive disappointment in Week 1 as well. A lot of people streamed their defense, played their defense.
Absolutely.
A lot of people expected Baker Mayfield to look good. There was a lot of chaos. The Titans confused him with a lot of their movement and personnel groupings and how they matched up defensively, and he did not settle in, Baker Mayfield. He tried to force everything, look for the big play, and he just looked uncomfortable the entire contest.
When Greg Robinson got ejected, that's when Baker Mayfield got extremely shaky. Before that, he was still having a few issues, but he looked like he was going to be fine. But then they lost their left tackle, who's already a question mark, and had to go to their backup, and it was a mess.
Well, and he left too.
Yeah.
They had to go to their third string.
They had to go to their third string later. It was an absolute mess. And so I blame it on that. I know the Browns' offensive line is a major question mark and still is for this season, throughout the entire year. It's the one unit on that team that was going to hold them back ultimately. But it's still hard to gauge how much value, when you're playing with a third string left tackle, Baker Mayfield will be. I think they'll be fine in this game, especially because it won't show in the box score and it's overshadowed from his $250K watch. But Odell Beckham looked awesome.
He did.
He looked great.
Everyone else kind of tanked.
Yes.
Odell, from the first snap on, when they were feeding him vertically, when they were feeding him intermediate, looked fantastic. He looked exceptional.
Especially
exceptional. But I am wondering why Freddie Kitchens didn't try to force feed him the ball in the second and the third quarters when this team was really, really struggling, just to get something going, just on manufactured touches, and he just didn't do that.
So this is why a lot of the industry had Beckham ranked as a top 2 or 3 receiver. I had him still 5 or 6. And I know that's nitpicking, but the reason why I didn't have him above guys like Mike Thomas and the rest of the top 3 is because I had concerns about him being used in this offense, not from an efficiency standpoint, but from the fact that Baker Mayfield just throws to an open guy because he's a true quarterback. He doesn't look to force feed anyone. And so even with Rashad Higgins leaving early with an ankle injury and now coming back, we expect he'll play Monday. I do wonder if Beckham will still get 8 catches, 150 yards, what everyone else expecting him to explode, despite looking amazing. Like I said, he really did look amazing. But I think they try to get everyone involved still, even though Beckham is the clear cut, you should force feed him.
Have you ever had mono?
No, I have not. But I know you have. Am I supposed to say that?
No, I've had mono.
Good. Yeah.
It was after my
early age. Let's say that. Not yesterday.
My first semester of college. During the same time, maybe related as my first girlfriend. Her name was Mary, so maybe that is a little bit related
call out
here.
Mary publicly.
No, I mean, I'm not going to blame her for it.
Okay.
It's just, this is maybe why you don't draft quarterbacks that are 21 years old coming out of college, though, when they should still be in college. Is that a hot take for you?
I'd never put mono on my scouting. I will say that.
I've been working here for 7 years. This is the first time I've ever heard a quarterback missing a game or anyone missing a game based on mono.
I tried to think back to a time, and I can't remember anything. I don't ever remember this instance
Even
happening.
in college, I've worked on the college football section here, and it was not a thing.
And it came out of nowhere, right? Gase just showed up, hat down, shadow looming over his face. Darnold's out a few games, and that's it. That's all he said. And the press is looking around what the hell just happened?
It's time now to welcome in Hayden Winks to the podcast. Hayden writes the fantasy forecast column up on Rotoworld. All the important matchups, all the important game previews. It's fantastic. Last week was its debut. Definitely go and check it out ahead of week 2 for all your major fantasy football decisions. Hayden, let's start off. And these are the games that you picked I want the audience to know that. San Francisco 49ers at the Cincinnati Bengals. Not a game I would have picked, but you did. The Bengals are 1-point favorites at home with a total of 45 in this game. Did you like what Zach Taylor showed in his debut as a play caller with the Bengals last week?
Yeah, the reason why I picked this game is Zach Taylor and the Bengals just really surprised me last week. I think they're going to be the sneaky, productive offense this year in fantasy. The primary reason is the passing volume. So last week, the Bengals ran a pass play on 74% of first downs within the first 28 minutes. That was the highest in the league. And he's using his wide receivers just like how the Rams were using them. John Ross is Brandon Cooks, and Tyler Boyd is Robert Woods.
I was neutral on the Bengals in week 1, given their pass protection woes going into Seattle. Bad offensive lines don't travel. But now I genuinely can't talk about the Bengals without having a smile on my face because they were fun.
That doesn't happen often.
They were so much fun. Like play action leading to Andy Dalton having time. He finished with a median pressure rate in week 1, and he was allowed to throw downfield to John Ross often. Like it was genuinely exciting to watch them play.
Yeah, they were. I think John Ross finished second in air yards. He still looked like John Ross at times. He had some bobbles, he had some drops. But he looks really explosive, and I think Zach Taylor doesn't have any options other than to try to manufacture touches to him, whether that's like on screens or working downfield.
Not to pivot over and get you off balance here, Hayden, but what do you think about Jimmy Garoppolo last week? His 5.5 yards of average depth of target was the lowest in all of week 1. It seemed like to me that he was honestly afraid to get hit in the pocket. Like he was afraid of contact coming off injury. Like he just wanted to get the football out as quickly as possible, not look down the field. And I think that showed. I mean, the Bucs were worse in that game, but San Francisco wasn't good either.
Yeah, he looked really uncomfortable, like you said, and that was a primary concern coming into the year for the 49ers. Kyle Shanahan asked his quarterbacks to stay in the pocket longer, and that's led to his quarterbacks getting hit often. And I think it's just going to take some time for Jimmy G to get used to it, but it's certainly concerning.
Go ahead.
I think Dante Pettis comes back this game. I know he played 2 snaps.
Daigle, we can't say that, though. He played 2 snaps in week 1.
I still think he is not on the injury report at all right now.
Was he last week?
He hasn't been on the injury report at all. I know, but I still think okay, I cannot say it confidently, but I'll say
You just did.
IMO that he plays a full set of snaps this game. I genuinely think they have to have him, but the uncertainty surrounding the receiving corps in San Francisco still allows George Kittle to be their number 1 target.
Yeah, George Kittle accounted for 37% of San Francisco's passing game targets last week. Hayden, if I had to put you on the spot, other than George Kittle, is there anyone in this game that you're excited to play on the 49ers?
Possibly Matt Breida, just because the Bengals gave up 6 receptions to Chris Carson, and we all think that Matt Breida is good. So he would be the other Niner I would take. We can't bet on Pettis. I'm not sold on Marquise Goodwin or Deebo Samuel, even though they played most snaps. Just kind of set Kittle up for another 30+% target share, and then kind of roll the dice with Breida and then get on out.
All right, let's now go from one new offense in the Cincinnati Bengals to another new offense. That is the Dallas Cowboys visiting the Washington Redskins. Dallas is 4.5-point favorites with a total of 46.5. Let's wax poetic here, Hayden, about Kellen Moore's new offense there in Dallas.
Yeah, so if the Bengals are sneaky good, the Cowboys aren't just regular good, they're really good.
Yep.
So under Kellen Moore, this offense basically turned into an analytics-based offense overnight. So on their first down pass rate went from 41% last year to 62%, play action rate 25 to 48%, pre-snap motion up 45% to 73%. And we saw last year Dak Prescott with Amari Cooper, it's magic. They're 10 games together. Dak's averaged 72 more passing yards and 0.44 more passing touchdowns with Amari. And Amari Cooper's now up to 18 fantasy points per game with Dak.
It's the little nuances in this offense that make it so fun as well. Zeke getting a slant. The Cowboys running pistol. Yep. And from the past half decade, this is from Bob Sturm of The Athletic, the Cowboys, when they ran pistol, 12 of 13 actually ran the ball, but they passed the ball. When they come out in 12 personnel on first down, they have historically leaned on running the ball. It was a given. And yet they ran play action the very first play, which set the tone for the rest of the game. It was just fun to watch them play. And I know Kellen Moore right now he doesn't have footage out there.
Right.
So in like 5 games, he's going to be playing against himself because then defenses will adjust. But I still think it's early enough against Washington to where the Cowboys can escape here.
Hayden, is Michael Gallup a confident wide receiver 2 start for you? Because I'm kind of headed in that direction already with him.
Yeah, he had a 22% target share last week, looked really explosive. He's going to be more boom or bust just because the way they operate with him. But yeah, he's in the mix for a wide receiver 3 for sure. And yeah, hopefully you got him in your best ball shares because I think he's going to have a lot of big weeks this year.
Yeah, Dak was only pressured on 12.5% of his dropbacks last week. That's lowest in the NFL. It certainly helps to have a new, smart offensive coordinator when you also have maybe the best offensive line in football. Again, that's just a big aid for that play caller. We haven't mentioned the Redskins at all, Hayden. They were a surprise last week. Not from a running standpoint with Darius Geis, who now most likely will miss 4 to 6 weeks, if not a little bit longer, so enter Adrian Peterson, but from a passing standpoint, and namely rookie Terry McLaurin. I'm assuming you were impressed with his rookie debut as well.
Yeah, 3rd highest ADOT among receivers with at least 7 targets, looked really explosive. Could have had more if Case Keenum hit him on one more of those deep passes, but yeah, I think he's the number one. Chris Thompson's going to get involved. Maybe Jordan Reed returns, but I think the industry's kind of sleeping on McLaurin. I think he's closer to like a wide receiver 3-4 than he is like a wide receiver 4-5 that he's kind of being ranked at right now. So yeah, the shares are there. Maybe the Cowboys defense could limit him a little bit more than what the Eagles did, but overall, for season long, I think McLaurin's somebody you're going to want to roster.
I prioritized Marquis Brown just over Terry McLaurin on waivers, but only because of the offense he was married to. Terry McLaurin does have the ability, and he showed it, to have standalone value, and that only gets better as the season goes along because once Dwayne Haskins enters, they have the college connection, obviously. So,
I hear you.
Yeah, so I love Terry McLaurin. I think you were expecting me to add something else to that sentence. I was done talking about it.
I said it in my head, but this is a family-friendly podcast, so I did not mention it. I will say this on Terry McLaurin, though. He is someone who created separation deep on his deep post, and so that's winning in the small game. Then he kind of mossed Ronald Darby along the sideline and plucked the ball over top of him. That's winning in the big game. That's a lot to show in 2 different ways of winning and catching the football in just your debut in a game you were supposed to be overmatched in.
Yeah, well, going back to his Ohio State game, he was one of the most efficient receivers, not in college football, but for a long, long time. And it was just they hadn't used him enough. So this is kind of the first debut where you're seeing McLaurin getting the targets he's kind of deserved for the last couple of years.
All right, let's move now to your final game of the week. Again, you can check out all these matchups up in Hayden's Fantasy Forecast column. The Sunday night performance, the Philadelphia Eagles at the Atlanta Falcons. Philly on the road are 1.5-point favorites, 51 total. Julio Jones didn't have a Julio Jones type game. Well, I guess he did against the Minnesota Vikings because there's some history there of him not performing well. Matt Ryan was atrocious. This whole offense was atrocious. Is there going to be a better performance here for Julio? Can the people who drafted him in round 1 bank on a good outing against the Philadelphia Eagles this week, Hayden?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a team that with a huge bounce back performance. The Eagles just got shredded, like we mentioned. And Julio Jones just kind of got outplayed by David Rhodes, which is kind of surprising. Rhodes hadn't been as efficient of a corner the last couple of seasons, but he looked back. But we saw Terry McLaurin win over in the middle and the Redskins, and that's where Julio does most of his damage. And at home against a bad Eagles defense, I think, or bad Eagles secondary, I think that he deserves to be the wide receiver 1 overall this week.
Ito Smith and Devontae Freeman split snaps down the middle, 39 each, but I don't think that's the case moving forward. I still think we're looking at a 70 to 75% snap rate for Freeman as long as the Falcons stay competitive in this game, which I think they will.
Here's my concern, though. I don't know if it's a Devontae bounce-back spot because of how well the Eagles' defensive front did against the Washington Redskins last week in a very positive game script for the Redskins. I don't know if we can once again count on Devontae Freeman here.
I think we can count on his passing game usage. I don't think he needs to get the carries. You're giving me the skeptical
I don't
look
know
right
about
now.
that.
If they're competitive, he's on the field on passing downs, whatever that means. But he'll be running routes on passing downs.
Hayden, settle this debate between us.
Yeah, I think Devonta Freeman did not look good. Like he didn't look explosive. And yeah, I think the snap share will even back up towards Freeman seeing more snaps.
Thank you.
But yeah, so I'll settle the debate this way. Chris Lindstrom being out is not good overall.
Disaster.
I think that's okay for Julio. I think that if they have to get the ball out sooner, that's going to go and feed Julio more. Yeah, Freeman's kind of sketching me out. I still have him as an RB2 for sure. But the Week 1 performance was not very promising.
Love Deshaun Jackson usage in Week 1, Hayden. I'm sure you did as well. I mean, it wasn't just those vertical shots that he beat Josh Norman or whoever else was lining up against him on the right side of the Redskins defense. They also used him near the line of scrimmage, didn't they? Like it was manufactured touches, it was screens, it's get the ball in his hands. And, you know, for a long time, we've considered Deshaun Jackson as this high variance player. That's either we have to pick his peak games or get nothing out of it. But Hayden, I think his usage from Week 1 kind of speaks to him maybe being an every week starter for us in fantasy football.
Yeah, I agreed. It was definitely very refreshing to see him on screen. Definitely had a step. And this was with his little finger injury too. That was obviously not an issue. Falcons secondary could be exposed. Last week they gave up 28 points with only 10 pass attempts. Obviously that's going to be way different this week. Carson Wentz looks good in the second half especially. So yeah, I think Deshaun Jackson is a wide receiver 3 with tons of upside. So
we talked about the Atlanta rushing game and how that might be an issue. Because of how good Philadelphia's run defense is. Atlanta's run defense last week, 172 rushing yards allowed to the Minnesota Vikings. Not saying that the Eagles' run offense is as good as the Vikings, but could this kind of be, Daigle, a performance where Miles Sanders could really get going because Miles Sanders' performance in Week 1, his debut in Week 1, was a lot better than statistics might show?
Yeah, they essentially split the touches, Sanders and Sproles. Howard was sprinkling in a little bit, but Sanders still played nearly 50% of their offensive snaps. He had a 21-yard touchdown called back for an offensive penalty, which actually then allowed him to not reach his prop, but who's counting that? So I still think it's a tremendously buy low spot on Sanders.
Yeah.
I've been doing the 2019 equivalent of calling around my leagues, trying to trade for him, whatever that is. So yes, I'm still very, very high on Sanders moving forward.
Hayden, I was a little surprised at how much Darren Sproles played in Week 1. Like, we know that Darren Sproles has always been loved in Philadelphia, and, you know, they try to get involved each year after year, but injuries just have prevented it. But it seemed like when they needed to get something going and it wasn't just a run-based option, that Darren Sproles was being inserted there in a lot of passing situations.
Yeah, this is a perfect game script for Darren Sproles. And yeah, he was stealing too many carries from Miles Sanders and Jordan Howard. Well, primarily Miles Sanders, but yeah, I think we'd be getting too cute with it to pick up and start Darren Sproles this week for sure. But he's definitely going to be involved with maybe like 4 or 5 targets every week.
Yeah, again, the Week 1 distribution of touches is something that we all jump into a little bit too much, but Week 2 tells us a much bigger story. Hayden, thanks so much. Again, everyone out there, go and check out Hayden's Fantasy Forecast column. You will not regret it. It's fantastic. Hayden, we'll talk to you soon. Now it's time for Patrick Doherty to join the show. You might know him as RotoPat. Pat writes the rankings up on Rotoworld. Go and check those out for all of your start and sit dilemmas. Pat, let's start off with Drew Brees against the Los Angeles Rams, who you have ranked as quarterback 12.
Yeah, you know, Drew Brees is kind of a divisive player this summer. I was kind of on a team done, or not team done, just hashtag team, like different quarterback, not the volume king anymore. He was that in Week 1. He had his yardage total would have been his third highest of 2018, as would his attempts total. So, you know, it's tempting to say, oh, you know, maybe Brees is bouncing back from a low-volume season and be more of the fancy Drew Brees we know and love. But we know that this isn't the return of the old Drew Brees. We knew this was an environment where he was going to have to do that. I believe I had him ranked even though I faded him all summer, I think I had him as the QB 4 or 5 last week, and we expected this to happen in that environment. Now headed on the road, this should be another high-scoring game in theory, but you just can't ignore Drew Brees' home road splits. He only had 11 touchdowns in 8 games away from the Superdome last year. I mean, these are small sample sizes, but it's been a thing for years with Drew, and now when he's over 40, I just don't know how you can ignore that. Vegas seems like they disagree with me. It's a 52.5 over-under, but I just think Brees is best treated on that QB 1-2 borderline.
Pat is taking on the desert this week. Yeah, you mentioned his stats last week, Pat. 32 of 43, 370 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. I know your rankings update all throughout kickoff up until Sunday, but are there any surprising names that you have listed above Drew Brees because again, I think a lot of people see him as a consistent fantasy starter, and quarterback 12 might be a little low for them?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you're surprised that I have Aaron Rodgers ranked ahead of him after a really tough week 1 and another tough matchup. Same with Cam Newton after a really rough week 1, but a gorgeous home spot on Thursday Night Football. I don't think anyone would be too shocked because right now the quarterback position, to no one's surprise, is looking extremely deep. So each individual case, maybe people wouldn't be that surprised by, but I would understand why people would be surprised just by seeing QB 12.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but where do you have Michael Thomas ranked in that case? Because do you think that Drew Brees not performing in this game sinks Thomas's value as well?
No, I have Thomas 3rd or 4th, and it wouldn't be QB 12 is support top 5 receivers all the time, and we know it's a narrow offense, narrow target tree. So not necessarily worry. I still like Alvin Kamara and I still like Michael Thomas to get their numbers, but yeah, I mean, QB 12. It's not like I'm saying it's like QB 25, But yeah, I understand the question. But yeah, Mike Thomas, who went totally nuts against the Rams last year, it wasn't the Superdome, should get his in LA.
Shifting on over to the Detroit Lions and Kerryon Johnson against the Los Angeles Chargers at home. 16 carries last week, Pat, for Kerryon Johnson, 49 yards, 2 targets, 2 catches, 13 yards. Not that great of a development for people that invested around Kerryon Johnson around like that running back 18-20 mark. And this week, Pat, against the Chargers, you have him as running back 22.
I mean, to me, that was kind of one game is one game, but that was kind of a red alarm game for Kerryon Johnson in Arizona. To only touch the ball 18 times in a game where the Lions ran 84 plays, to only draw as many targets as waiver claim J.D. McKissick, who actually would have out-targeted Kerryon Johnson had his game-ending reception at the end of regulation not been called back by the Lions calling a timeout. He does get a defense that just got lit up by Marlon Mack, but I mean, that was kind of a worst-case scenario game for Kerryon Johnson if you were someone who invested highly in the fantasy draft summer. One game is one game. Maybe Matt Patricia will adjust. Hasn't been not really known for his adjustments so far early in his NFL career, Josh. I was very concerned by what we saw from Kerryon Johnson last week.
One game is one game, but the Lions will arguably never see that play volume again for the rest of the season. That's the biggest concern.
Yeah. Totally.
It's overly concerning, too, because if there was ever a game with extremely positive game script that you would expect a running back that also included overtime to see 20-plus touches, it's this one. And again, like you mentioned, Pat, they just were inserting J.D. McKissick. They were just inserting C.J. Anderson.
Yep.
They were throwing passes to Danny Amendola way too often if you really like Kerryon Johnson. I just don't know if they realize, Pat, like how good of a talent Kerryon Johnson is.
It seemed like they did when they cut Theo Riddick,
right.
But that was just them realizing how bad Theo Riddick was, which is half the battle. But yeah, I mean, to not get 20 touches in that game last Sunday, you almost had to like work to do that, and congratulations, they did. So good job, Matt.
Next up is Tyrell Williams, the new number 1 wide receiver for the Oakland Raiders, who faces the Kansas City Chiefs this week. Yeah, Pat, in his debut as the lead wide receiver, Tyrell Williams caught 6 targets on 7 targets, 105 yards, and a touchdown. I got through it. You have him as wide receiver 27, Pat. That's outside, again, of the top 24 wide receivers. And we know that Kansas City's defense obviously tries to keep up with their offense, and the Raiders' offense will try to do the same thing this week. There should be a good amount of volume headed in Tyrell's way.
I've since made a stunning rankings adjustment, and he's now wide receiver 25.
All the way up.
Yeah, this is one I'm really interested in what John and you think, Josh, because, wide receiver 25 is arguably too low against a Chiefs defense that just sprung DJ Shark and Chris Conley for career days with Gardner Minshew. I just don't know, even despite how good the game was. So obviously I moved Terrell way up to where I had him last week. I've got him as basically a wide receiver too, but it's still in a deep position, even in a great matchup. I just don't know how high I can move a Raiders number one option whose skill set still doesn't mesh with Derek Carr. But I'm certainly being open to convinced that I have him too low, and understand people if you're trying to basically cram him into the top 20. But I couldn't quite decide what felt right with Tyrell Williams this week.
Given Derek Carr's splits at home against the Chiefs the last two games, he's destroyed them. Just under 300 yards and 3 scores, and 417 yards and 3 scores. As well as the fact that I did not expect Tyrell Williams to fit into the offense seamlessly. Derek Carr still got his peppers underneath, and then it opened up Tyrell Williams for a few deep shots. He finished 15th among all skill players in air yards last week. And now he's playing an even worse defense, essentially. So I do think the Raiders are in a sneaky spot to hang. And so if I bumped up Tyrell, it would probably be no further than just inside wide receiver 2 range, like wide receiver 19. But yeah, I think wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 is his floor.
I might make another stunning adjustment and go for wide receiver 23, I think.
Pat, this is why I can never do the rankings for the website, because I just try not to think of Derek Carr and the Oakland Raiders. Other than Josh Jacobs, it's just something that I don't want to do on a Thursday, on a Friday, and just have that infiltrate my brain. I would rather think of positive thoughts, optimistic thoughts, things that make me want to enjoy football. And still, maybe they continue to disprove me, but the Oakland Raiders just do not do that for me right now. Fair?
Yeah,
Fair.
I'm going to share a woe is me first world problem, but people really do not realize how hard it is to do ranks until you do it every week.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I will say
it's the hardest job in the world. Just admit it. It's just the hardest job in the world. So
Darren Waller also in a great spot.
Let's close with another tight end. That is Mark Andrews against the Arizona Cardinals. Pat, we talked about at the top of this show, but the Ravens did an awesome job of using all 3 tight ends, but it was Mark Andrews the one that saw most of the production. Caught all 8 of his targets for 108 yards and a touchdown, and because of that, Pat, you have him as tight end 6 again this week against the Cardinals.
Yeah, I kind of feel silly for how low I had him last week. I think it was tight end 11 or 12. Just more on the
so silly. It's a tough job, though, we heard.
It's again tough. You might think being a welder is tough, but being a fantasy football ranker is just so taxing. Mark Andrews, he's an explosive player. The Ravens are going to give chances to make explosive plays down the field. He was 3rd in raw tight end yardage last week. He was 3rd in tight end air yardage last week, despite this being basically a game that it wasn't competitive for any amount of time, but was only in the sense of the word game, a game for the first half. The second half was a scrimmage, and he still got those numbers. We already knew about his seeming special connection with Lamar Jackson. Got a lot of confirmation bias on that last week, and he is basically who we thought he was going to be. And look at the matchup he has this week. He's T.J. Hockenson. Mark Andrews would have been the tight end story of week 1 if not for T.J. Hockenson. Who was it T.J. Hockenson blowing up last week? It was the Arizona Cardinals, and now that's who Mark Andrews has for week 2. So really, you can make an argument almost to put Mark Andrews in the top 3 or 4, but tight end 6, I feel like it's fair for the young lad.
I still find it funny that he played 42% of their snaps as opposed to Hayden Hurst and Nick Boyle, who both played 56% of their snaps, and yet it's Andrews who still came away with 8 catches for 108 yards. It's almost like you have to ignore always his statistics on paper behind the scenes and just play him because he's going to get his every single week.
And you kind of almost just have to throw out all the Ravens snap counts from week 1 because it was such a bizarre game.
That's totally true.
But yeah.
All right, Pat. As you mentioned, you update these all the way up until kickoff on Sunday. Who knows? Maybe Mark Andrews will be tight end 5 by the end of this episode. Ooh, craziness.
Don't
Pat,
put him through that kind of work.
Keep grinding. Keep working hard. We appreciate all the hard work that you put out there, Pat. And also, Hayden, be sure to go check out Hayden's Fantasy Forecast column. We talked to him earlier in the show. John Daigle, Me and you just chilling. We're going to be back, though.
We're just always here.
On Sunday, noon Eastern, for Rotoworld Live. You can find it on the NBC Sports YouTube show, on Rotoworld's Twitch channel. Ian Harditz is going to join us this week as well. If you enjoy this podcast for any moment, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to tell one friend. That always helps us out. We'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks so much. See ya.